salam was created. Friday was the day that he was sent down to earth. Friday is the day that the day of judgment will occur upon. Friday is an incredible day. It is a day where we can reflect and try to answer this reality. فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instills within this day a mechanism to make us do this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, He commands us, when the call to prayer is made, rush, فَاسْعَوْا, rush to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leave off all bay'ah. This is what He calls bay'ah. And also after He will mention lahu, so distraction and business. Leave it. فَاسْعَوْا. And you will never find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you to run towards anything else. But He will tell you to run towards the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards the remembrance of Allah. فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. That is better for you if you had perfect knowledge. If you had true knowledge, you would know that I need to be here. This time, this moment, this day, this is where I have to be. That's what Allah is saying. إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If you really knew, if you really had good understanding of life, you would know that this is the place you have to be. And then He says, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Right? And right when the salah ends, go out and do what it is you need to do. Whether it's work, whether it's business, whether it's family, when it's over. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ. He says, مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ. So He didn't say, I want all of your Friday. He says, I want a part of it. And it's not that long, actually, as all of you know, right? It's not that long. Just a little bit of time. And we see here that all of us have answers when we talk about فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, where are we going, as individuals and as communities and as a society, where are we going? All of us, if I were to ask you, you would come up with some type of answer. But the reality is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives answers too, right? In this book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down to us, and He mentions in Surah Maryam, a celebration really of His best servants. That's what it is. When you go and read Surah Maryam, you'll find really a celebration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's best servants. From Maryam alayhi salam to Isa alayhi salam to Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? And going all the way down to Musa, to Ibrahim, right? Allah is mentioning some of His best servants in all of history. Their legacy. But then He says something incredible. He says, فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ أَضَاعُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Right? He says, there came after these people. فَخَلَفَ, right? We know this word khalifa means like someone that is a leader. But khalifa means really someone that's going to come after. Right? And that's why the word, right, when we say khalf, is also a word used for giving birth. So it means someone that's going to come after. So they said after them came people, khalfun ada'u salah. Right? They lost the prayer. They lost the salah. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that they stopped praying. It doesn't say they stopped praying. It said they lost it. As in they lost the essence of it. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us something about salah. He says, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. That salah is a preventative mechanism for that which will harm you. But for us, we can pray, we pray, and then we can go and do whatever. We have no problem. You know, it doesn't work as a preventative mechanism for us. And that is because the essence of salah is lost. You know, if I can pray and then go and cheat someone at work, or go and abuse someone verbally, or yell at someone, or, you know, be harsh to my wife and harsh to my children or harsh to my spouse, if I can do these things right after I prayed, that means ada'u salah. And that means that my prayer doesn't have its effectiveness. I'm missing the point of it. So here is the point here. So when we talk about Jumu'ah, when we talk about Friday, Friday should be a mechanism, right? Where we're coming here and we're leaving with something greater than we came with. We're leaving with our essence. We're leaving with strength. We're leaving with courage. We're leaving with faith, compassion, mercy, love, that these things are accompanying us as we walk out of the door. Because when you walked in the door, in a Sahih Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that at every masjid there are two angels, and they are recording the names of those people who walk in. So when you walked in the masjid, your name was recorded. And then when I stood up and said Assalamu alaikum and the adhan was given, the angels that were all here sat down to listen to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a spiritual exercise. We have to have the composure and the presence to understand that we're not just sitting here. We're not just passing time here. We are going through an exercise that is answering the question, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, He says, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. He says everything is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything in the heavens and the earth, creation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created is doing tasbih. Whether it's a rock, whether it's a book, whether it's a human, whether it's an animal, everyone is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now in these ayat of tasbih, you'll find them all over the Quran. You'll find this ayah or a similar one all over the Quran. And usually you will find it accompanied by two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say like Al-Ghafur Al-Rahim, Al-Aziz Al-Hakim. You'll always see this understanding that Allah will mention usually two names after He mentions this fact, that yusabbihu lillah. Everything is praising Allah, and He is the most forgiving, the most merciful. He is the wise, He is the just, He is all of these things. He is worthy of this praise. But in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, you'll find actually four. You'll find four realities. He says, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions four of His names and attributes, that He is Al-Malik, He's the King. Al-Quddus, He is the source of all purity. Al-Aziz, He is the one of great respect and great authority. That's usually when you see Al-Aziz, it's usually translated as mighty. Mighty is better for Al-Qawi, right? He's the mighty, He's the strong, He's the powerful. But Al-Aziz, Al-Izza is like, there are people that have authority. For instance, Donald Trump, he has authority, but nobody respects him really. He has authority, but not really respect. No one really thinks that highly of him. So you have, people can have authority, but they're not respected. People can have respect, but they don't have power. They don't have authority. They don't command authority. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-Aziz, He's saying He is the respected and He is the authority. And Al-Hakim, He is the most wise. He is the source of all wisdom. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He shows us that Surah Al-Jumu'ah shows us one of the etiquettes of Yawm Al-Jumu'ah, which is to increase the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Throughout the Quran, He mentions 2, but in Surah Al-Jummah, He mentions 4. This is one thing that we can start with. And then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He shows us, in summary, the mission of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He shows us in summary. You can reduce all of the seerah to this ayah right here. And it's connected to what he said before. يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ الْمَلِكِ الْقُدُّوسِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, He says, أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ, that He sent the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He sent someone from amongst you, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. One, to convey, right, the ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, to recite to them, to teach them the ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing here that we can understand is that how did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam transform his society? He did it first with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. So first thing, education. Second thing, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Right? To purify the people. Right? To purify their hearts, to purify their soul, to show them their natural inclination, to show them their center. Right? فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ. Where are you going? Right? To show them the reality, the physical and spiritual realities of this world. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. And teach them the book. Give them a relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Teach them how to be wise. So here we have these 4 things. The ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the physical and spiritual realities of the world, the purification of the heart. And then thirdly, teach them and give them a relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then lastly, teach them how to be wise. وَإِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. That before this, before we had this, before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave us these things and the opportunity to have guidance, we were completely misunderstanding the point of life. Without these things, we will miss the ball when it comes to answering the question, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ. Where are you going? Where are you heading? Where is your life heading? This is how we answer that question. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us Friday to find, to orient ourselves, to answer these questions, we need to realize that Friday is a day in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created as a reminder for exactly where we're going. And that is to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we stand for salah 5 times a day, that is a reminder that we will stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when we come together on Jummah, when we come together on Friday, that is a reminder of how we will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. This is all a reminder. It's building up. When Hajj comes around, right? Hajj is coming around. People will literally dress in the clothes that they will be buried in. They will literally be dressed in the clothes that they will go into their grave with. And they will stand at Arafah, where we know people will be gathered on the Day of Judgment. It's all working towards it. Right? When you talk to different people about death, talk to them about it. Don't say, man, that stuff's depressing. I don't want to hear about that. Let's change the subject. Right? For us, we have to understand that death is a part of who we are. Right? It's a part of who we are. It's a part of how we live our life. But it's not there to depress you. It's there to teach you how to live your life. It's there to put value in every moment that you have, every second that you have. The remembrance of death is just so you learn how to live life. It's so that you learn to live with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's where people don't understand, is that Allah only wants us to increase us in that realization so that we can capitalize upon the opportunities we have right now. So we can understand that the present moment is the best moment. It is the most prime moment for you to show your potential. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, وَاذْكُرُوا هَذَا مِنْ لَذَّاتٍ. He said, remember, increase your remembrance of the stopper of all pleasure. Right? When we leave our bodies, when we leave this life, right? That will be an ending of the life of temporary pleasure. And then what you did in this life will determine if you will have pleasure anymore. If you will be in bliss for the rest of eternity. So that's why it's so important to understand فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ. Answer that question with how you want to live your life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we go through Surah Al-Jumu'ah, that's exactly what He says. He says, قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the death that you're running away from, الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ, the death that you're running away from, فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ, it will catch up to you. ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ. Then you will be returned to the one who knows all, who sees all, who's in command of all, whose will placed your life at the point that you're at now. You didn't ask for the parents that you have. You didn't ask for the life that you have. You didn't choose what geographic location that you're in. You didn't do any of those things. You didn't choose whether you were poor or whether you were wealthy. You didn't choose the state of your life. All of those things were determined for you. But what you will choose ultimately is you will choose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will choose to be grateful, or you will choose the other pursuits of this life. So for us, this is what we need to focus on here. When we talk about Friday, we talk about a microcosm of the greater picture of our life. How you conduct yourself in these moments, right? Getting to Jummah on time. How you conduct yourself, right? Bathing, showing good hygiene, shaving, trimming, putting cologne, taking care of yourself, right? Increasing the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, paying attention during the khutbah, not on your phone or not talking to this person. This is in a microcosm, in a vacuum, an understanding of your etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your ability to concentrate. Right? When you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your ability, right, to not let your mind wander, to take command of your soul and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to sit here and get lost in distractions and get lost in this life. And that's why the Surah Al-Jumu'ah, it ends with وَإِذَا رَأَوْا تِجَارَةً أَوْ لَهْوًا. Right? If they see a distraction or they see an opportunity for business to make money, تَرَكُوكَ قَائِمًا, they'll leave you standing. Right? This is what happened to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. This was his experience. This was the experience of Musa alayhi salam. This was the experience of the prophets. That when people found opportunities to distract themselves with, they took it and they left you standing there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلْ مَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ اللَّهْوِ وَمِنَ التِّجَارَةِ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet to say, tell them what is with Allah is more, is greater, is of greater value than distractions and fun and business and money. Wallahu khayrul raziqeen. And if you are looking for those things, you're not going to find it anywhere else than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu khayrul raziqeen. Who's a better giver than Allah? Think about it. Who's a better giver than Allah? Who's going to give you those things that you want? So that's why we say, focus on the giver. And you'll never worry about what you're getting a day in your life. Focus on the giver. Allahu khayrul raziqeen. Focus on Him, and He'll give you whatever you want. But the reality is that most of us are in a state of distraction because of what He has given us. That's why He says, Ya ayyuhal insan, ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem. He says, O human being, what has distracted you from the remembrance of Allah? What has distracted you from your Creator? Rabbikal kareem. He says, and then the scholars, they said, Subhanallah, Subhanalladhi radda jawabahu. He says, Subhanallah to the one who answered his own question. Because he said, Rabbikal kareem. It is the generosity of your Lord that has distracted you. So this is something incredible for us that we need to focus on, that we need to find ourselves on the day of Friday. And inshallah, we can do that with a little bit of focus, a little bit of discipline, and a little bit of knowledge that we can, inshallah, strive to answer the question, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ولذكر الله أكبر فاستغفروه إنه هو التواب الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Our Lord, O you who are most compassionate and most merciful to us, we ask you as we're gathered in your beautiful house, that you send down upon us your blessings and your mercy and your love and your compassion, that you shower us with your divine benevolence, and that you make us people who strive to be beautiful souls and beautiful hearts that enlighten their circumstances and their surroundings, no matter whom they interact with or wherever they go. Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, show us the direction that we need to go. Allow us to follow your guide, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Allow us to strive for beneficial knowledge and to strive for the company of the people whom you love. Ya Allah, those whom you love, allow them to love us and spread around us your love. For we are in great need of good company and good people, and we are in great need of those who remind us of you. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. أقم الصلاة. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Imam Eid. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you found it beneficial, drop a like and a comment. To see our previous videos, click here. And to keep updated with us, subscribe. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.